Let's take a look at the exercise, the mindfulness practice that is set out for you in Chapter 1 on leadership, which really is an exploration of self-leadership. The idea, among other things, that the more skillfully we're able to lead ourselves, the more that will enhance our capacity to lead others. Now, in Chapter 1, in the leadership chapter, you're introduced to a 3-minute practice, which in some ways is probably not what you're expecting for your first mindfulness practice. You might be expecting you're going to pay attention to the breath or something like that. At the same time, the exercise is something that is probably somewhat familiar to you, which is that you're going to sit for a period of time and think about a question. At the same time, we are setting ourselves in motion for the more typical and traditional mindfulness practices like attending to the sensations of the breath. And we're also pointing the way towards really what is at the heart of integrating mindfulness into our lives, which is to actually be able to sit and ponder a question in a more reflective, mindful, stable, steady, less distracted way. So let's see how these may begin to come together this week with this 3-minute practice. On page 8, you're given a self-leadership inquiry where you ask some questions that would be interesting to reflect on at the start of your mindfulness journey or the continuation of your mindfulness journey. Questions like, what attributes and values are important to you as a future member of the legal profession? And there's 6 of these questions. And so at this stage in the book, you would pause and reflect on these questions and write down, your answers. And that can be helpful, now upon reflection, perhaps setting intentions and perhaps thinking about some of the meaningful shifts that might take place in time. On page 18 is where you get to, at the end of the chapter, as is the case with the end of most chapters, the mindfulness practice. And so the instructions for this mindfulness practice are 1, to set a timer for 3 minutes. So for each day of the week, you will practice for 3 minutes. After setting the timer for 3 minutes, if you're not already, to sit, if that's comfortable posture for you, and then to sort of get settled in. There's some instructions for settling into a little period of sitting and reflecting, or whatever the case may be, as is common with many meditative practices. And then we get to the heart of this practice, which is number 5. Number 5 is reflect on the day's question until the timer goes off. And that's the practice. Sit, and for ease, you're given in a journal type form with an opportunity to note your observations, each of the questions that you previously answered. So this isn't the same exercise. We're not reading these again and answering these again, although that might be the inclination. Rather, we're reading the question of the day, each day a different question. You'll work your way through those 6 questions. And for those 3 minutes, you're thinking about that question. And whatever that means, whatever it means to be thinking about something and the experience that you have while doing so. When the 3 minutes is over, you then write down your observations. What do we mean by observations? What did you notice? What did you observe? What was your experience during those 3 minutes, to the extent that you're able to, articulate what your experience of those 3 minutes was. That's not answering the question, although if you were thinking about it and you came up with some answers, you might weave that into, and that might be a part of your experience. But this is looking more to your direct experience of those 3 minutes, which is a little different than what was your answer to the question. And so we will explore that, and you'll have an opportunity to explore, especially as the chapters move on and you move into these mindfulness practices. But of course, we're very interested in being able to reflect on a client's question, or the question from the court, or preparing a motion or a memo, or responding to a court filing, and to be able to do so more mindfully aware, engaged, attentive, aware, less distracted, less lost in mind wandering, all those sorts of things, and to meaningfully be able to draw upon our interior experience in those moments. And so we begin with this pretty straightforward exercise of just sitting and thinking about a question. to move in this direction. Now, importantly, it's also the case that we're sitting for 3 minutes a day with a question to get used to sitting for 3 minutes a day. Most of the practices that we'll be doing that you're invited to explore will be for 6 minutes or 12 minutes or 18 minutes. Those are the lengths prescribed in the book and in the practices that are made available to you for free on the So Be Mindful app. But first, for many, it's challenging just to find the time to set aside to sit for a very short period of time, relatively speaking. And so for this first week, in addition to noticing what it's like to reflect on a question, we're also just getting in the habit of sitting for 3 minutes, finding and making some maybe course corrections over the course of the week to a time that's useful. Earlier tends to be better for many, but that's up to you. The time that's useful, the location, letting people perhaps know that you'll be doing this so as to not be unduly interrupted, etc. And then on the last day, on the 7th day, rather than having a question, you're invited to just set the timer for 3 minutes and sit for those 3 minutes. All right, I hope this is helpful. Be well.